All right. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the Humble Bears Gym here. We have a little Bible study today in the book of Genesis, chapter 16. And God had just spoken to Abraham here, showed him great, promises. And bingo, he does something stupid. Okay, now I say that here in the modern United States of America, despite what's going on in our society, where guys are trying to marry guys and girls are trying to marry girls, it's like, this is real. It's like, no, that's not real. That's an abomination to God. But here back in the Old Testament, now, women, don't be mad at the messenger here, but frequently the patriarchs, they took more than one wife. Kind of like the thing that the Mormons do here in the United States. I'm just telling you what it says, okay? I'm not telling you that I agree with them or I disagree with them. I'm just telling you this the way it was in the Old Testament. The laws of the land then permitted it. The laws of our nation don't permit it, okay? We have people that procreate many, many children and put them all on, social services. And somehow the law is not opposed to that. But if a guy tries to have, more than one wife and pay for both of them, then the law is against them. So I'm not saying either is, I'm not trying to condemn or support either one. I'm just saying, our laws are a little confused, okay? But we're not going to go down that road today. We're not here for that, okay? We're here to learn the Bible, okay? In Genesis 16, Sarah, Abram's wife, had a little maidservant named Hagar, It was her property, and she could do what she wanted with her property, okay? And she could also give her slave to her husband, and that was legal. That was fair, and during that time, for the laws of the land, that was a thing to do so that you would have kids. Having sons to carry on your name was like the greatest, And so they're about to do that. So don't shoot the messenger here. And I'm teaching you like it is, okay? I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a little bit of a lack of faith in my opinion. But let me get off the track here. I'm very good at getting off the track. What's an interesting little oxymoron, it's almost like a paradigm, is sometimes that the people that God blesses the most, and they're really happy about it, and they turn right around and they do something stupid. I don't know why that is. Like, why do pastors' kids sometimes are the worst stinking kids in the church? Why? Well, one of the reasons is, I'm getting really way off the track, is because they've heard this book their whole lives, and yet they reject it. And when you reject the Word of God, knowing it's true, that's serious business in God's eyes. When you reject His Son, that's very, very serious business. That's like a curse upon your life. Same with now, not quite to the extent of that when you back up just a little bit. Someone that God has spoken to, shown a vision to, said, I'm going to bless you. And then they turn around and do something very fleshly, very fleshly. And so I better get into the book here before I get way down the road on something else interesting, but we're going to try and stay on track here. Okay, here we go. Genesis 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, her name is Sarai, not quite Sarah yet, and he's still Abram, not Abraham. So just little points of facts. She bare him no children, and she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. So you can kind of see what's coming, right? Okay. And Sarah said unto Abram, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid, that it may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abraham to be his wife. So they didn't do like they do nowadays, where people are just shacking up and, oh yeah, this is my fiance. We're boyfriend, girlfriend, we're shacking up and making babies. No, in that day, when a man and a woman, when they were given to one another, it's like that man is now responsible. And that woman's child are going to have the name, and he is going to be her husband, and she is going to be his wife. Very cut and dried, very clear. Okay, and so we see here, we have the Hebrew people marrying into the Egyptian culture through, which eventually we're about to tell you here, Ishmael. Okay, the Hebrew culture marrying into the Egyptian culture, and there you have another line of the Arab people group. Okay, and so kind of half Egyptian and half Hebrew. Okay, through Abraham. And kind of the Arab peoples are very confused, like a lot of people in the United States, very confused. They worshipped in ism, okay, and it's wrong. It's a cult. Okay, there's only one true God, and that's through Jesus Christ. And so they're kind of caught up in this little cultic thing. But one day, they will see the truth. And God's not going to allow any nation to come into the Middle East and just smear the Arab peoples off the map just because they're troublemakers and problem children. That might be true, okay? But that's not the point. Okay, and it's about this. God's about to say here, His hand's going to be against everyone's, and everyone's is going to be against Him. It's just, it says what kind of child that Ishmael and the lineage that they are going to be. It's going to happen, but you know what? They're still God's people, and God's not going to let anybody just exterminate them off the map. Okay. Okay, here we go. We're going to get moving on here, believe it or not. So Abraham and Hagar, they hooked up, okay? Well, that's a safe way to put it, right? Okay. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. So she had pride. She had pride over her mistress who owned her. Even though she was given as Abram's wife, she was still Sarai's property. It's kind of hard to understand, but you know what? That's just the way it was. Okay. And Sarah said unto Abram, My wrong be unto thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. So Sarah kind of overreacts here. And you know, like any woman would react, where she has her husband and a man, and he goes off and he's making babies with somebody else. How do you feel? Messed up in the head. That's how you feel, okay? And it's the way it was. And so she became very angry, obviously, especially because Hagar despised her mistress. In other words, there was a certain pride involved, okay? And Abraham said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, she fled from her face. So Sarah probably slapped her around a little bit, and that day it was legal, it was customary. You know, that's how they kept the slaves in order. Just the way it is. Don't shoot the messenger. It's just the way it is, you know. The slaves had to be taught. If they disobeyed, they were whipped. That's the way life is, you know, like a child. If a child doesn't listen, eventually he has to get a spanking on the butt, okay? It's got to happen. You know, just hollering at him saying, oh, Johnny, if you're not a good boy, you're not going to get candy today. That doesn't work, okay? Go to any store or in the candy section, and mommy and daddies are, okay, Johnny, if you don't behave, we're not going to buy you a bag of candy. And he's 12 years old, and he's the biggest monster in the store. Parents, it didn't work, okay? Eventually, you got to have a little discipline on the hiney, okay, with the belt or hand, just so they, not abuse we're talking about. We're talking about just understand that you got their attention, that if they do wrong, something's going to happen, okay? And that's what kind of Sarah did with her little maidservant here. And the Bible doesn't say she did wrong, when a slave mocks their master, that was a disciplinary problem. You could be punished for that. That's just the way it was. Okay, so don't shoot me. Just telling you the way it is. Okay. All right. Verse 7, and the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. So she ran off into the wilderness. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence comest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress, Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. All right. Once again, the whole slavery institution, the institution of slavery, the Bible kind of indicates slavery is going to return then again into the land in the end times. Let's face it, it's going to happen. This whole thing of we're poor. As a nation, we're so poor. We got billions to give away to other nations so they can buy guns with it and have civil wars, with one another. But we're very poor, And so eventually, we have in our country, we have, we got our social system, we got the welfare system, food stamps, all the helpful agencies. Eventually, that's going to come to a screeching halt. They're going to say they're poor and they can't afford it anymore. And they're going to probably call it something else like a work assistance program, where you go and you live on these pseudo plantations. And, voila, within, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it'll be like, the slavery that was during the 1800s in the United States. But Bible kind of indicates that it will happen. But don't quote me, I'm just saying that it's indicating, we'll talk about that when we get to the book of Revelation. But anyway, the angel says, no, you go back to your mistress. She owns you. Okay, yeah. You got prideful and haughty with your mistress. Maybe she slapped you around a little bit, but she owns you. Now you get back. And she did, and she obeyed. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. In other words, the Ishmael, the Palestine-type people, the Arab mishmash of the Hebrew and Egyptian culture. That's why I think they fight so much. It's like because they're like siblings almost. They have the same father, Abraham. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. We've seen that, in the Middle Ages when we had they had the holy wars, where the Crusades, and they marched into the Arab nations. And it's just so far from home. You can't really wage war so far from home, especially in that day. Even in this age, we see the difficulties that are involved. It's just huge, the shipping and the back and forth, and having ships off sea. The cost is just huge, and they couldn't really afford it. But that was God's plan. And God ain't gonna allow anybody, even no matter how superior their forces are, to wipe out, the people that come from Abraham. And that includes the Palestinians and some of the Arab nations, whether they worship false religions or not. God's not going to let any nation wipe them off the earth. That's just not going to happen. He has a plan for them. One day they will see the truth, and they will return back to him. And we'll deal with that in another day. Anyway, let me get back on track here. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So you can kind of, that's like a perfect picture. You look at the Palestinian riots, you look at this, at least in this, it's 2013, the civil wars and the coups and the anarchies we see in the African continent, in the Middle East, with Libya, Syria, and on and on and on, all these other little Arab nations that are in civil war. They're just, they're given because that's their nature. Okay, and you're not going to win them by dropping free guns and money in their lap, because one day if they're mad at you, they're just going to turn them on you. And we as a nation in the United States, we have experienced that, but we just keep doing the same thing. But that's not my problem. I don't control that. The Bible simply says that's the way they are and that's the way they're going to be. So you're not going to change them. Unless you get born again, it's like if you could, transport millions of Bibles in there and change them, allow them to be changed, they would. But, you just dropping Bibles into place doesn't make them transformed into Christians. It's still a choice that you have to make. Verse 13, and she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou, God, seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Bir Laharoi, behold, is between Kadesh and Bered. Very interesting. Says the angel. Guess who it was, folks? Jesus Christ. When the Lord comes down here and appears on the earth, he's called many things. We read before, Melchizedek, sometimes the angel of the Lord, sometimes I am, okay? Same person. Jesus contains all the deity of the Godhead in bodily form. And so when there's visits here on this earth of deity, of Christ, that's him in bodily form. And this is before he came through the womb of Mary. But this was Christ. He came and talked to Hagar, said, look, you are going to have a people group that you can't number, and they're going to be my children too one day. So, okay, let's move along. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his name, which Hagar bare Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abraham. So he was already an old man, 86 years old. That's pretty old. We don't have kids that much at 86 years old. Not that we won't want more kids at 86 years old. It's just that by that time our bodies are worn out. But in that day they still did. And, later on we see Sarah, she was 90 years old and she was very beautiful to look at. Both Sarai and Abram were blessed with very vigorous lives, even though they were old. And so we did pretty good once again through Genesis, and we made chapter 16 almost like a blur. It was like a flash. We just moved right through it pretty quickly. Hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. And with that, from the Bears Gym, with a little sweat from Wisconsin, God bless you folks. Have a great one. We'll see you.